Hi, my name is Danielle Daya, and today I will be presenting my Module 7 Analysis of Learning for TEL 102 Professional Education in Community Context. I will begin by discussing what is ethical literacy. Gorski 2016 and 2017 defines ethical literacy as the knowledge and skills we need as educators to be a threat to the existence of bias and inequity in our spheres of influence. Essentially, the objective behind ethical literacy is to discard bias and inequity from the classroom and facilitate a positive learning environment where all learners can thrive. Ethical literacy improves our ability to recognize subtle biases and inequities throughout the lifespan, essentially. It's extremely prevalent, yes, and important in the educational setting, but this is a skill that is beneficial as diversity has been proven to make us essentially smarter. It makes us more creative, and it makes us collaborate better. Ethical literacy moves us into the messiness through deeper comprehension, as Gorski and Pathini 2018 note. There are 7 steps within the equity literacy framework. I will discuss each one. In step 1, we are identifying biases or inequities, both explicit or implicit. Explicit can take the form of school traditions, school policies. Implicit, rather, will take the form of a general assumption about a person or a culture, etc. It's typically stereotyping is implicit biases. They're very negative and they can impact how we collaborate and also form meaningful relationships with individuals. They can hinder the learning experience as well and limit the internal rationale to succeed in the classroom. In step 2, we take stock of differing perspectives. See, the beauty of the equity literacy framework is it doesn't say, I'm right, you're wrong. Essentially, we're trying to understand the other perspective and then try to communicate our perspective and make it really a teaching moment as we expand each other's worldviews and opinions. Step 3 considers possible challenges and outcomes. This is essential within consolidating any plan throughout the lifespan and will be proven to be beneficial. Step 4, we imagine equitable outcomes. Step 5, we brainstorm immediate solutions. I like that step 5 is the immediate solutions and step 6 is the long-term solutions, because oftentimes in management, we get so lost looking at the bigger picture that we lose track of what we could do currently to fix an ongoing situation. Step 7, lastly, is to craft a plan of action. Although I think that this step can be incorporated throughout the equity literacy framework steps. I think as we consider problems, we're either subconsciously or consciously constructing a plan on how to address them. And this slide, I'm just demonstrating again an example of implicit biases. These are assumptions, stereotypes, school policies, school traditions. This could also take the form, and I've read a study in a previous course within ASU about how teachers grade thinner students versus above average BMI students. And whether we like it or not, there are trends that demonstrate that teachers unconsciously are grading thinner students better. I wish I could find the study, but I just remember it's from one of my cognitive courses in the last session. In terms of what I know now, what comes to the forefront of my mind is the importance of critical literacy. And Dr. Neil Lester, who teaches at ASU within our Inspire teaching module, defines critical literacy as approaching any text approaching anything ultimately that we can understand and perceive with a sense of why, how, who, what, and when, rather than limiting our question to what is this about, what happens in it. And he says that through the how, we can often track a pattern of how things happen, but it's important that we develop an understanding of why things happen and look at things not just from the micro level, but also the macro level. Look at our systems as a whole, our policies, etc. I think a pivotal aspect of the equity literacy framework is to consider ourselves as lifelong learners. We are constantly developing attitudes and learning more information through critical research and changes in our general education models, etc. And it's important that as future educators, we are educating ourselves and we are looking at studies to understand how our instruction is impacting our students and how our policies are further reflection of what's going on in our world. I think there is a lot of overlap. Critical consciousness instruction involves teaching our students to pose and explore critical questions and using them as a lens through which to see why events happen and how they happen and what interacts with a certain principle, etc. I think we also have to teach our students how to observe multiple perspectives and why these perspectives exist. And a lot of that is essentially looking at things at the macro level, not just the micro level. And this can happen through examining counter-hegemonic content. I find that schools often explore a very Eurocentric, white, hegemonic male voice within their course curriculum, whether it be their textbooks or prominent writers that we're analyzing critically. I think that we need more diversified curriculum resources as well as teaching our students databases and how to access primary sources that they otherwise would not have explored. When I consider major challenges moving forward, it's almost impossible not to consider school culture. I find, especially in my own educational experience, I went to a private independent school, predominantly upper middle class. It was very impermeable to break policies. I know that for a while the dress code was viewed as sexist because oftentimes women would get in trouble for breaking dress code more so than men. It was very limiting and restricting comfort-wise, and it definitely did not make school a positive environment when you're constantly being criticized by teachers for what you're wearing, even though you're comfortable, or say you haven't washed your clothes and all of these things that have bigger implications. That would be one possible challenge for myself. Also, I'd consider families of students, because oftentimes parents do complain, and I don't think it's very easy to get parents to see where you're coming from on your end and why something is a toxic practice or behavior. I think a lot of this will need to be explored through better educating our parents as well on harmful practices. One possible way to ameliorate any possible issues would be a frequent newsletter. I think expand their realm of consideration and understanding. Another possible challenge could be coworkers. In a few of the case studies, there is serious stereotyping happening with hypothetically an older teacher, and she doesn't like that one of her students is speaking a different language in the classroom. I think a lot of these implicit biases, teachers need to be aware of their implicit biases, and they need to understand why they exist and how to limit any negative behaviors that can arise. And I think this requires a lot of internal realization and meaningful practice to squash, honestly. An IET class? Not an IET. There is an implicit bias assessment. I've taken it for a few of my courses, and I think they're very helpful, and they can lead us to try to find resources to help ourselves, in a sense, because we also are lifelong learners, and it's important not to say I'm not blah or blah, but like accept that you are who you are and you believe what you believe, and also understand how this could be harmful to an individual. I think one of the issues is that we so often squash that our students can also teach us, and I think it's important to give equal voice to our students within the classroom as they learn as much as we learn, and they might observe trends that we do not observe, and it's important to make this a collaborative environment because it empowers our students and gets them to feel that they can implement changes too, which is important. We want to facilitate and make this a constant for them because we want our learners to have self-esteem inside and outside of the classroom. I think also faculty meetings need to be more efficient. So often I've had previous teachers complaining about a nonsensical faculty meeting with no direction, no plan. I think it's important that we tell our faculty what the meeting will be about prior, just so that they can really try to digest any potential thoughts that they might have and prepare for this meeting. That way it's, useful time, I also think that revision of instruction methods must be in sync with current trends within education. America has like the largest achievement gap, and we're constantly falling behind according to PISA, while Finland continues to be like one of the number one nations for education. And And I think instead of just being like, oh, it's our funding. I mean, it is our funding, but I think it's also more multifaceted. We have failing schools, and these schools are often significantly less funded. Our properly funded schools are all, or predominantly, upper middle class schools. So it's definitely a classist other layer to this problem. And I think our failing schools often receive younger faculty, so maybe we could consider getting a more seasoned faculty to come and teach. We might also consider how Finland's requirements for teachers is significantly greater than the United States. Could it be that we are not getting high quality teachers because a lot of them lack the training and experience? I think also when you're putting that much time into becoming something, it's very clear that this is something that you want. And I think that it might be beneficial for our teacher training programs and education requirements to be more substantial. I think also educators are lifelong learners, so we need to constantly educate ourselves. We need to read. We need to expand our worldview, engage in critical theory discussion within an educational frame, or watch documentaries, speak to people, whatever we can do, So the last question is, what are you committed to doing to further your knowledge, disposition, and skills related to multicultural diversity and social justice issues? I think that it's important to get to know our students as well as our families, connect with them, make the learning experience more collaborative. Studies demonstrate that when parents are involved with a student's learning process, there is more encouragement and willingness to connect with the learning materials and be a more active learner. Additionally, I think it's important that we are willing to address the issues and not squash them. To dive into the messiness, we need to do a lot of critical thinking and hear and read from voices we typically would not hear or read from. I think also we need to meet diverse learning needs within the classroom. All learners do not learn in the same way. One way we can keep things very copacetic is we can incorporate multiple learning strategies. And I think that's very important because different cultures have different ideas of how one learns, and we can learn from other cultures as well. I think lastly, there is a necessity for professional development opportunities, and we need to get our principals to, kind of like formulate these kinds of things. I'd like to thank you for a wonderful session. It hasn't been my easiest session, but I really enjoyed learning critical practices that are essential for the classroom. I feel like so often we fail to see issues, and it's helpful to learn through models of potential situations we might encounter. I'm also sorry if this presentation isn't my best. I just got a diagnosis of enchondroma and I'm terrified, but nevertheless, I loved learning with you and I really thank you. Have a wonderful night. Take care.